I'm going to bring him onto the stage. Brian, man, thank you for joining me. We're joined with Brian Berletic. He is a Bangkok based geopolitical researcher and writer, and a former U.S. Marine officer. Thank you for your service. How you doing, Brian? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. I wasn't an officer. I was enlisted. There's a it's a little bit of a difference there, but just for the record. But thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure.
No, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you. Like I told you earlier, I before I knew who you were, I had um, reference materials from videos that you did because they were that good. And so when you contacted me, I was like, "Oh, this is very nice." And then I looked up, I was like, "I know this guy. This is New Atlas." Um, Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate you joining me. Your outlet, just so everyone will know, it's the New Atlas on YouTube, but you also write for another publication, Neo, which is not allowed on Twitter for some reason.
Yeah. It was censored off of everything back when X was Twitter and Meta was Facebook, and I was also censored off of both of those platforms. And I was able to somehow sneak back onto X, but X is still censoring links from it's a Moscow-based journal, but I mean it's tiny and it's so benign, and I don't know I don't know what they're so scared. And it's
Brian,
been
I would,
in State
I would
Department security reports and stuff, and I'm just wondering, like, how do
really
they perceive this as a threat? Yes.
look. I would tell you the tiny outlet that we worked at on a radio station. They got rid of us,
Yes.
and they literally passed sanctions to get rid of our network. And I remember I was on my way, I think, to Malaysia. I was on vacation, and I'm watching CNN at the airport with a Blinken coming out saying, "Yeah, we're going after RT Sputnik. These sanctions are going to go into effect immediately, and we believe that they were instrumental in preventing Africa, the global South, from jumping onto the Ukraine war." And I'm sitting there like, "Wait a minute, I think he's talking about me." It's a weird thing, right? To watch Secretary of State saying stuff that affects you. Usually, they're just saying stuff that doesn't affect, you know. It was very bizarre. It was a very bizarre moment. Thank you for coming on. I have a lot that I want to talk to you about. You are the person I want to talk to. There were two of your articles that I want to go through. And I want to start it with this notion that, oh, okay, let me start with this first. Your first article that I was going through is this one: worst case scenario. And you point out that the tariffs that are walling off America from the world may not be arbitrary, that Trump is going through a playbook in the way that he's operating this with the idea of targeting China. Now, I've argued that I think we're at a tipping point. And the reason why I say I think we're at a tipping point is because Donald Trump is trying to actualize what was the potential, which is effectively power. You saw the actualization of military power in the sense of Ukraine, and we lost. All of the West came together, put all of their forces. The US was directing it on the ground, and they lost, which means this articulation of power in a military sense was stopped in a way that was clear and present to the entirety of the world. Okay, so you didn't have the power that you thought you had in the military sense. Trump comes in and tries to flex this economic might. How much might does the United States actually have? Yeah, countries will respond to us if we're picking on them individually. But does the president and does the US really have that much economic might where it can take on and bend the entirety of the world into shape that is in its best interest? Well, China says, kick rocks. So China has increased tariffs on the United States to 125% in response to the tariffs that the United States has put on China. And that is astonishing because what China is effectively saying is no, you don't have the power that you think you have in order to shape us in the way that you would shape your European countries. Europe is meeting with China coming up in July, where they are, I would imagine, are going to talk about having to deal with how do we deal with this economic war that Donald Trump wants to wage. So you're getting two very large economies that are maybe that were disparate, might be inching together in order to deal with the fact that the United States has gone rogue in regards to these tariffs. I'm fascinated by that. It puts me in the mind of Nasser, where you get the Suez Canal. Brits, the Israelis are trying to take it. The U.S. president comes in and says no, and there's this turn in regards to world affairs where it becomes clear Britain is no longer captain of the ship, that the U.S. has effectively taken power. And I'm saying that war in Ukraine, this trade war, especially if you get to a situation where the United States cannot affect its will, are both tipping points. Give me your take on that. Second, I want to go into the article because I think the article is fascinating and I think you may be onto something. Give me your take on the first one first.
Well, I agree. And you with your previous guest, you showed that clip of General Wesley Clark talking about 7 countries in 5 years. It has been much longer than 5 years. And so this was the United States thinking that they had all of this power, and they thought that that was plausible, that they could actually do that. And they planned for it, and they laid it all out, and they implemented it, and it has taken so much longer. They're actually very far behind schedule. And the further behind schedule they become, the more the world changes and pivots away from the world that existed when they planned all of that. And there has been this fundamental paradigm shift economically, militarily, in terms of the proliferation of technology, all kinds of technology impacting the economy of all nations around the world, but also the balance of military power. And so they're still locked in this post-Cold War mentality. They're not taking note to how the world is changing. They're not looking at how improbable this strategy is. And so what they're doing is they're rushing. They're out of time, and they are rushing to implement this. They want to reassert primacy over the globe. And it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Biden or Harris. These are all client regimes run by Wall Street, and that's who they answer to. And my article was citing one of these think tanks, Heritage Foundation, which put out Project 2025. And you could see the Trump administration going straight down the list, ticking each one off, implementing every single policy mentioned in that document. This has nothing to do with Make America Great Again. Make America Great Again is the smokescreen continuity of agenda is continuing behind.
And I'm glad you said that. Let's go into that. That article is fantastic, by the way. And you lay it out in very clear detail, very coherent, in a sense of Trump is building a wall around America economically. And he's doing so even if it damages America, knowing it would damage America, knowing people are going to have to pay higher prices, knowing there's going to be layoffs, meaning he doesn't care about the economic damage. He accepts that there's going to be economic damage to everyone else as he does this, with the idea of insulating himself for potential war with China. Did I get that correct first? And then please expound upon it.
Absolutely. And again, this isn't Trump's idea. This is something they have been talking about for years and years. This was actually something that was introduced during the first Trump administration and continued uninterrupted under Biden. This was the decoupling from China specifically, but now I think there's a desire to decouple from much of the economy because they understand that they are going to have this conflict with China, just like they're having this conflict with Russia. And look what happened to Europe because they didn't decouple before they started this war with Russia. And look at how that has damaged their economy and how weakened they've become. And look at the trouble that they've had with their military industrial base and America's military industrial base too. And so they're looking at that and they're thinking, well, China's much bigger. It impacts our economy much more. And if we don't decouple now on our terms, and if we provoke this war that we are engineering and attempting to provoke with China, while we're still coupled to their economy, it will be suicide. So that's what they're doing. And they know it's going to gut the American economy. The cost of living is going to spiral out of control. They talk about reindustrialization as if that's something you can do. Like, we'll do it next week. It's something that takes years and years and years. And that's if you commit to reforming your education system. I'm talking about unprecedented for the United States, unprecedented reforms that have never taken place, have never even been talked about. investing in infrastructure, investing in industry, nationalizing industry. They're not talking about, and they will never do any of these things. So they're lying about reindustrializing the US. They're decoupling, and they're talking about transplanting industry into the US. They're literally trying to move factories into the US with the workers because they know American workers aren't going to be able to do it, at least not in the beginning and not for the foreseeable future. So this is what they're doing. This is how desperate they are. But the more desperate they become, the more dangerous they are. What was something else President Trump, and before that, the Biden administration, and before that, the previous Trump administration, what else were they working on? They've reconfigured the US military to fight China, not just in Asia Pacific, but to interdict maritime shipping all around the globe. And now this Trump administration talking about seizing the Panama Canal, annexing Greenland, and specifically in relation to maritime shipping. So what they're doing is they're walling themselves off from a global economy. They're about to implode, and China specifically, while they're setting up what is almost certainly going to be an interdiction campaign against Chinese maritime shipping worldwide. And I remember I was talking about this, and people were telling me this will be apocalyptic for the entire global economy. Well, now people, maybe they understand why the US wants to wall themselves off from the global economy. They know they're going to implode it, and so they're preparing ahead of time instead of being connected to it or standing underneath it when it implodes.
It's not just apocalyptic, it's effectively a nuclear war. I mean, no country, if we think of the last Cuban Missile Crisis, where the US was trying to prevent missiles from going into Cuba, they thought that the world was about to end, like both sides. And when people went home that night, they were like, all right, I'm going to kiss my wife. This might be the last time I see him. Meaning, because it's understood that if you are attacking ships from a foreign country, the foreign country is not going to tolerate you attacking ships from a foreign country. China has a massive military. Nuclear weapons can travel over continents. How do they, this is so desperate. And not just desperate, it's delusional on some level. I mean, even on the economic side, how do they really think that they are going to get into a war when China has the industrial capacity that it does, and the US is not going to have the industries, the education system needed to support those industries? Like, we are missing things that are necessary to have a war on the scale that they're talking about having. They don't see that. I mean, this seems like they're missing a few Plinko chips.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a reality. China does have a massive and growing military, which is more and more capable of doing many things. But one thing that it's not capable of doing is projecting military power all around the globe. So say the United States did use its Navy at the Panama Canal, at Greenland, at other places, the Red Sea, where they already are right now, attacking Ansar Allah and Yemen. China really doesn't have a way of dealing with that, and so this is what they have laid out in their policy papers. So none of these things are things I'm just imagining or guessing at. They have written entire policy papers over many years, spanning many administrations, and the pieces of the puzzle that are required to implement this policy is done by each and every successive administration. And this is one of the things, a maritime blockade of China, knowing that they don't have a Navy capable of spanning the globe like the US. So the US is looking at their strengths, and we can't deny that they have a global spanning military that nobody else has even close to. And
right.
So they're thinking of ways to utilize that in ways that China cannot answer back. China can answer back along its own coasts in the Asia Pacific region. Beyond that, it becomes more and more difficult. So an analogy is like you're sick, you have cancer, you get chemotherapy, it's killing your whole body. But the idea is you're going to kill the cancer first, your body will make it through. That's the theory. And this is what the United States is thinking about doing, destroying the entire global economy, putting this pressure on China, trying to implode China, hoping that, yes, we're going to completely maul the US economy, the American public, our history. But when we come out of this, we'll be in a better position to reassert ourselves geopolitically than China. This is what they think.
And just to back up your point, This is Hegseth
Most
talking about the Panama Canal.
China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal. And China will not weaponize this canal. Together with Panama in the lead, we will keep the canal secure and available for all nations through the deterrent power of the strongest, most effective, and most lethal fighting force in the world.
Every accusation, there we are. Every accusation is an admission. Every accusation is an admission. Nobody was threatening the Panama Canal, just like nobody was threatening the Arctic in regards to this notion of Greenland. And if you notice, he said Panama would take the lead as he stands there with the U.S. military backing him in this attack, right? Like this is just like this stuff is just so shallow. Like the world has to see it for what it is. We will defend the Panama Canal from China. And China's like, who the hell is attacking the Panama Canal? We will defend Greenland from Russia and China. Who the hell is attacking Greenland? Like I'm just astonished by this stuff. You were making the point that these are choke points. These are points where the U.S. is like, if we hold on to this, we can control shipping lanes, and we can effectively control maritime trade under the guise of navigation, free navigation, quote unquote.
Yes, and they're doing the exact same thing in the South China Sea. They say the U.S. Navy is there to protect freedom of navigation, but their own think tanks, the CSIS, for example, which is funded by the U.S. government and the arms industry, they admit that the vast majority of the shipping going through the South China Sea is Chinese exports and other nations exporting to China. So it's China's shipping. So you're protecting Chinese shipping from China's threat to freedom of navigation. It doesn't make any sense. But as you say, they're accusing China of this, but it's them. They are the ones who are planning on disrupting it. That is their strategy, is to disrupt it. They cannot fight China directly. They will try to strangle it economically. That is their strategy, and they're putting all the pieces into place to do it.
But they know what China's response is going to be, right? China is going to take that 1.4 billion people, and they're going to start building ship after ship after ship after ship, and it's going to man them with the 25 million man military. And it's going to be out in the water, meaning they're going to create an arms race. That's what they're going to end up doing. And it's one thing if you're doing this in the 1980s. You're doing this in 2025, where China's industrial base, manufacturing base, and technological base is intact. Do you think this is going to even work?
It's hard to tell because it's hard to predict what China will do and if it will be successful in terms of responding to a global maritime blockade by the U.S. Navy. Because you're right, they will mobilize their military, their economy. They already, in many ways, have been all of this time. They've understood all along that a non-white nation rising to prominence will never be accepted by the collective West. That's just a given. They know that, and they're going to have to fight for peace and prosperity within their borders and within the region of the world they live in, and peace and prosperity around the globe that they're trying to contribute to. So there's that. They were building the Belt and Road Initiative. This was these were land routes to move goods and people, knowing that the maritime routes were already being threatened. Years and years ago, they had policy papers just openly admitting that this was what they were planning to do. So China built these land routes. The U.S. has reacted to that. A lot of people are saying, we might go to war with China in the near future. The U.S. is already at war with China. Right now, they are arming proxies, armed militants, to attack and kill Chinese engineers working on the Belt and Road Initiative in places like Southwest Pakistan. We hear these attacks in Southwest Pakistan. Sometimes if you read the whole article buried in there, they admit that it's the Belt and Road Initiative that was targeted. Usually they may even admit that it's Chinese engineers. There was an attempt to kill the Chinese ambassador to Pakistan at one point. There's also a Syria-style dirty war the U.S. is waging against Myanmar here in Southeast Asia, where I'm based. And those militants have repeatedly attacked Chinese investments and infrastructure, including the Belt and Road Initiative. So the U.S. is already waging a war by proxy on China killing Chinese people, attacking and attempting to destroy Chinese infrastructure and investments. And what the U.S. is doing is incrementally turning up the pressure. And China is obviously reacting to this in turn.
What is Chinese response? Because China is fascinating to me. I mean, like, sometimes when I talk to KJ and I tell him, like, look, I'm an American. We don't believe in this notion of mutual win. It's either I win, you lose. It's zero sum. Like, we play chess. And KJ will say, yeah, we play Go. And I say, yeah, but in chess, the objective is to take the king. It's not like in Go where you're trying to surround. And on some level, you can kind of see that strategy manifest in real life in the way that they try to build these relationships across the globe. And in their mind, if we can build these relationships, this is the way we win. We win by building relationships around the globe, by building friends. We don't necessarily want to go to war and have these fights, et cetera, et cetera. That just seems to be the way they process it and think it. And I often ask this question, how does a win-win civilization deal with one that believes in zero sum? I'm fascinated by that dynamic because I think that's the dynamic that we're effectively seeing playing out on the globe in the way that China responds. From your take, how is China responding to this beyond? Because if you're right, and I suspect you are, we are slowly turning up our temperature on China, meaning we understand that the horse is out the barn, and the catch becomes, okay, how do you keep the horse back into the barn? Because after all, we want to retain primacy around the globe. I understand how the US is working towards that aim. How is China working to rebuff that aim beyond opening land routes? There's a military component to this, correct?
Yes, well, it's military, it's the Belt and Road Initiative, and it's also multipolarism. So China is one of the central pillars of multipolarism. They understand that creating an alternative geopolitical order for nations that want to work together constructively outside of this zero-sum mentality, by creating that and demonstrating that not only does it work, but it is better, it's safer, it's more stable, people will gravitate towards that. And I think we are seeing that. The problem is the U.S. will do almost anything to disrupt it. And that's what they're doing with the tariffs. That's what they're doing with all of these wars. They are trying to... It's like let's go back to the game board analogy. It doesn't matter what game we're playing. They're childish and immature. They are losing the game. So what they're talking about doing is just flipping the whole board over, overturning it, knocking all the pieces off everywhere to avoid losing, and hoping that when everything is put back together, they'll be in a more advantageous position than their declared adversaries. And how realistic is that? I don't know. I would warn people against. I mean, I would love to believe that multipolarism is a done deal. I don't think that it is. I think it's closer and closer every day that goes by. But I would not underestimate the U.S. I think underestimating the U.S. is what a lot of analysts did in regards to Syria. A lot of people thought that was frozen indefinitely. Eventually, Syria, Russia, Iran, they would get ahead of that and permanently cement that. But then what happened? Then Syria was overrun. So we have to be very careful. The U.S. is desperate. They are willing to do irrational things to move this irrational foreign policy forward. I mean, ultimately, it's totally irrational. You're 4% of the global population, and you want to run the other 96% in this day and age where there's this growing balance of power. It's just fundamentally irrational and it's unsustainable, but they're still determined to do it.
What's sad about it is our media and our political space doesn't explain it in these terms. So everything that happens, it just seems random. Oh, so-and-so happened. Oh, Syria just fell. Oh, look at South Korea. They just had somebody who tried to take over as a dictator. And they seem disparate in the way that the news media talks about it, as if they're just news bites, not realizing that there's a cohesive narrative among whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever stripe of president that you are, that is coherent and there's a streamline that's going through it. Here's another part that I want to add to this. And again, this backs up your point even further, right?
To build,
So
then we have to
right off the bat, Donald Trump is making all of these moves, but then he says this also.
We have great things happening with our military. We also essentially approved a budget, which is in the facility, you'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong because you got a lot of bad forces out.
$1 trillion. And to make this even worse, when they were looking at the Republican budget, we're already at what, $37 trillion in debt. The Republican budget over, I think, the course of 10 years would take it to like $56 trillion. And you ask yourself, what are you spending for $56 trillion? Like, what did you get for that money? And I think your point is, well, you would obviously have to build a massive military if indeed you're planning a war.
I mean, absolutely. And there's like this very shabby mind trick that they're playing with the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and they got everyone convinced this is a revolution, and they're cutting costs, and they're slashing the deep state, they're chopping it down, and they're just clearing room for this much, much larger deep state. The deep state is getting an upgrade, and they're just slashing and burning everything away to make room for it. He's not the peace president. He's the president of continuity of agenda. They all are. And he got everybody under his spell, this emotional wave that just swept so many people away. I can't even believe it. And now here, it was a bait and switch. And now here's the switch. And he's introducing the deep state's bigger than ever, new and improved, $1 trillion military budget. For what? The U.S. is located with an entire ocean on its east and west coast. There's literally no one on earth that wants a fight with the United States. So what is a $1 trillion military budget for? Russia doesn't want to fight with the U.S. China doesn't want a fight with the U.S. Iran doesn't want to fight with the U.S. Literally no one on earth wants to fight the U.S. or anyone else for that matter. It's the U.S. who is antagonizing everyone else. There is this policy of encirclement and containment aimed at Russia, in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Iran all around its borders, and of course, China. These nations are reacting. They have every right to react to this aggression and antagonism and encirclement and containment. They have no reason to not fight back. They have to fight back. If they don't, that is their existence is at stake. The U.S.'s existence isn't at stake. Only their empire is, which is unwarranted to begin with, should not exist to begin with. Make America great again, investing inward. This is a good idea in theory. Unfortunately, you have nobody who's actually interested in that anywhere in Washington, and surely nowhere on Wall Street.
So